Well, you might.
Nicely done. I'll get you back to work. Okay, so I don't have a PowerPoint and I don't really have a skit. I thought I would just give an overview kind of what's happening in the fire service, not only in Carlsbad, but in the state of California. I'm not a loud talker, so if you need me to speak up, I'll try. I have my water, because I lose my voice when I talk too loud, so just raise your hand if you can't hear me and I'll try and speak up. It's an interesting time to be in the fire service. It's a challenging time, not only because of COVID, but there's a lot of things happening at the legislative level, and a lot of it has to do with pre-hospital care. So I know everyone wants to talk about some of the wildland preparedness and fires for that, and we can get into that a little bit. But really the focus right now in the fire service is trying to adapt to some of the changes. We're seeing call volumes skyrocket, with the exception of 2020, we saw a dip. Because of COVID, everybody was afraid to call 911, get in the back of an ambulance and go to the emergency rooms. That didn't last very long, and about 6 months after COVID started, call volumes went right back to where they were and they continued to increase. So when we look at Carlsbad, since 1989, we've been 6 fire stations. And those 6 fire stations had 6 engines and 2 ambulances until 2005. We went to a 3rd ambulance. And since 1989, our call volume has increased by 300%. The population, I believe, don't quote me, was around 75,000 and now it's 115. Roughly, we actually had a little bit of a dip in population. I think it might be down to 112 is what they're estimating right now. But we're seeing the call volume really focused along the coastal corridor. So right around car country to the ocean and north to south, the whole stretch. What's interesting about that is of the 6 fire stations, there's only 2 in the coastal corridor. So 60% of our call volume is being spread amongst 2 of the 6 stations. So we're really fortunate that our city makes some good decisions, in my opinion, and city council supported us adding a fire station in the coastal corridor. So right off of Cannon Road and the boulevard, right near the ocean, we'll be putting a 7th fire station in place. It'll be a temporary fire station. We estimate that being sometime between January and March. January is the hope, but due to some delays in the temporary buildings, it may stretch into March. So once that occurs, there will be a fire truck out of there and an ambulance. So that'll help with some of the response times in the coastal corridor. So one of the other things we did as part of a multi-year plan, and city council again approved it, and very fortunate and happy for their support, is we changed our delivery model. And that'll be a big piece that I'll get into in a minute. Our ambulances used to have 2 paramedic firefighters on it. So it was a dual role. They were not only firefighters, but paramedics as well. And just a reminder, our fire engines, everybody on the fire engine is a paramedic. There's a captain, engineer, and firefighter. All 3 of them are paramedics. So we were showing up on scene with 5 paramedics. The requirement is 2. So we were well over that threshold of 2 paramedics. So what we've done to be a little bit more cost effective, but spread that ALS, advanced life support, or paramedic capability across the city, is we've switched to an EMT that is driving the ambulance. So not a firefighter, not a paramedic, just a basic emergency medical technician, but you still have 1 firefighter paramedic on there. And what that allowed us to do is go from 3 ambulances to 5 ambulances. So now we have 5 ambulances strategically spread across the city to make sure we can provide ambulance transport and paramedic skills to a broader sector of the community with a quick response time. So when you take that and you change that call distribution per unit and you add Fire Station 7, we're already seeing response times go down without Station 7 even being open yet. So those extra 2 ambulances are in place, and we're seeing a huge difference in that. And we're not lowering the service. We're still able to provide paramedic care. So we're proud of that. And we've been working on that for about 2 years. And just recently, a grand jury report came out of Orange County. And that grand jury report said that fire departments in the Orange County area, and there's 2 other counties, I don't remember them off the top of my head, up in Northern California, where a grand jury gave the same report, said fire departments should start putting EMTs on ambulances next to a firefighter paramedic. We're already there. The other part that this leads into that I alluded to earlier, state of California is behind. If you look at Texas, you look at Washington, there's other states in the nation that are doing community paramedicine, also known as mobile integrated healthcare. And where some of that stuff begins is at the dispatch level. And at dispatch, you can triage those medical calls and determine what the true need is for the patient. Fire service has a history of sending the whole cavalry. We send engines, ambulance. I mean, you see us flying down the street, sirens, it's ridiculous, to be honest. There are times when we need to do it, and if you go back in time, that was the best thing that we could do because we didn't know what we had. But today we have technology and we have the ability to use historical data to really at the dispatch level ask some questions. We have the ability to turn red lights green. There's things that we can do now where we can maintain those response times and just send the right resource. Sometimes it's just one or multiple resources depending on the call. So when we make those changes at the dispatch level, instead of emptying out a fire station, you're only sending 1 unit out of the fire station, so there's still someone left in the fire station to go to those other calls. That improves response times. Carlsbad has been leading the way in the county to do that. It's called tiered dispatching. We've been working with all the agencies in the North Zone to get everybody on the same page. We took the medical director that the city of Carlsbad had, and we transferred that medical director out of the Northcom Dispatch Center. So all of the agencies, with the exception of Escondido and the North County area, we share a dispatch center. It's a JPA dispatch center. By moving that medical director to that JPA and sharing the cost across those 14 agencies, we can now participate in that tiered dispatching model. So we are piloting that now. The first 6 months proved extremely positive, and we have it extended to December. We fully anticipate that that will be 100% approved, and the county has said that they want to adopt that model countywide. So again, Carlsbad's leading the way, and we're making some really big changes that I think will benefit the entire county. The last piece of that is that community paramedicine, mobile integrated healthcare. Carlsbad was one of 13 agencies about 6 years ago that was approved for a pilot program with the community paramedicine. And there was a lot of issues with it at the state level where the restrictions were so high that the amount of people that we could enroll were extremely low. We're talking less than 5 a month. The state has finally decided that they're going to remove some of those restrictions, and they're gonna open this up to where everybody in the state can do this. One of the requirements will be that you need a community health nurse, and you'll need community paramedics, and you'll need a tiered dispatching system. Guess what? Carlsbad has all of those. In fact, other than the city of San Diego, we're the only agency in the county that has all of those. So we'll have the ability to hit the ground running. We anticipate that those things will come into play at the end of the year, and we'll be able to hit the ground running at the end of the year and start providing that new level of service to the community. Some of that, an example, may be people who are high risk release from the emergency department, meaning you can go home, but there's a good chance that you're gonna be back. Our community health nurse can go make home visits and help with medication delivery, wound care, do the things that would be required to help those individuals stay at home and not have to go back to the hospital. We'll be able to do that. Other things might be, and we don't know which ones the state's gonna approve, but we do anticipate changing where we can transport people to in ambulances. Right now, in the ambulance, the only place we can go is an emergency room. That's it. there is definitely other places that people can go. Urgent cares are definitely appropriate for some things. I'm sure the police chief will talk about some of the differences that they're allowed to do now with a mobile crisis response team and transporting people to sobering centers. For me, it blows my mind that a police officer can transport somebody to a sobering center, but an ambulance can't. So I'm hoping some of those changes happen where we can go to, enjoy the sobering centers and some of the other alternatives for individuals that are suffering from other things that they don't necessarily need an emergency room. When you start putting all of those things together, you deal with another problem that you may have seen in the newspaper, and that's wall times. That's the technical jargon that we use, but what that is the wait times at the emergency room. An ambulance pulls up to an emergency room and there's no beds available. So you put the patient up against the wall and the paramedics stand there next to that patient against the wall and just wait, twiddling their thumbs until a bed's available. So what does that do? That ambulance isn't available to be back in the community and respond to the people that need pre-hospital emergency care. So there's legislation up at the state level dealing with that, and at the hospital level and at the state and county public health level, we are engaged in that, in those conversations and trying to make some changes there. So a ton of stuff going on. It's, again, challenging time, but exciting time. And I really think in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll see a whole different way that we deal with emergency medical at the pre-hospital setting. So, I'm talking a lot.
Well done.
I have to set the bar high, so.
So I can crawl under it.
That's right. So the last piece that I'll talk about, and then we can either do questions or have the police chief come up, is the wildland stuff, which I know is a big concern to pretty much everybody in California. Yes, we're seeing larger fires than we've ever seen. I believe our assistant fire chief made a presentation to this group about a year ago, maybe, about the increase in acres that are burned in the state of California, and it's dramatic. We don't see any let up in that. In fact, there's changes that we anticipate coming from the state, things that are in legislation now that are going to change some of the setback requirements. So one of the things that we do think is going to pass is right now from your house. So if you look at that exterior wall of a house, you'll see houses that have bushes next to the house, maybe a little walkway. And that we believe that from that wall, it's gonna go 5 to 10 feet out. You would not be allowed to have anything combustible. No bushes, no wood piles, nothing. So that could be a significant change. And the thing that we're looking at is it going to be with just new construction, or is it gonna be retroactive to where that change will have to occur on existing houses as well? There's some changes where the city of Carlsbad, the clear space from your house is 60 feet. Many places in the state, it's 100 feet. We think that we might be forced to go to 100 feet. So dealing with that from a fire department level and environmental habitat. So there's a lot of land in the state, and sometimes people will drive around and say, hey, look at that brush. Somebody needs to do something with that brush. It's fire season. Some of it we can't touch. It's protected lands from the state of California and some of its federal lands. How does it impact those lands, this new rule that might be coming from the state? So there's the fire prevention, brush management, but then there's also the environmental habitat. The two departments in the city are gonna have to work together and figure out how to make these changes if this comes down from the state. Also very high severity fire hazard. Those are areas that you can't build in unless you do specific things to lessen the likelihood of structure fires. There's talk about that going from very high down to moderate, to where those restrictions will be in place. So how is that going to impact the city of Carlsbad, whether it be residential or business building? things I would think that all of you would be interested in as well. So we're monitoring those things at the state level and trying to come up with plans and talking with other departments in the city of how we're gonna respond if those things actually do come into play. So for now, all I can tell you is do what you already know. Plan an exit drill in your home. Know the best escape routes. Make sure you're registered to SD Alert.
Alert San Diego.
Alert San Diego, thank you. Alert San Diego. And it's really hard to do and it's really easy to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway, is try and stay calm if you do find yourself in this situation. There's a saying that we use in the fire service, slow like a pro. You end up actually being much faster if you maintain your calm demeanor and you move forward at a methodical pace. You don't make mistakes, you don't trip, you get stuff. Know where the important things are that you want, grab them, load up the car, get your family together, and leave. If you get too excited, people get injured, car accidents occur. There's all kinds of things that can cause you to stumble and actually be much slower by trying to be fast than you would be if you just went slow like a pro. With that, I'll leave it up to the group. We can either ask questions or I can turn it over to my partner in crime.
Chief, the community where I live, we just spent enormous amount of money clearing the slopes of all the dead brush. But now we'd like to put down some ground cover. Is there any recommended ground cover?
Well, I can't tell you which ground cover to use specifically, but anything that holds moisture year round is what I would recommend. So it's things like ice plant or things like that.
Okay.
And I'm sure your community may have some landscaping requirements. I'm not sure where you live, but some of the communities have rules on what you can plant and can't plant and what it looks like.
Fire Station 7, when do they open?
We're hoping for January. It could be as late as March, but we're pretty sure that it'll be somewhere in that 3-month time frame.
Okay, thank you.
So why does the fire truck shows up every time someone calls for an ambulance?
Well, it's getting less, the need is becoming less and less because of technology, the way we respond and the amount of ambulance that we have. But historically, we would have 6 fire engines and 3 ambulances. And there's a paramedic there's paramedics on the engine, there's paramedics on the ambulance. So the likelihood of an engine being closer to that emergency than an ambulance is extremely high. And our hope historically is to get the closest paramedic to you that we have, so we can get there fast and hopefully make a difference in whatever emergency you're facing.
And then the ambulance will come just in case, but usually it's both.
Well, the ambulance comes in case that person needs to be transported to a hospital. So it's, one, we wanna stop the clock on the emergency, meaning we wanna get there and provide some type of intervention that's gonna help save a life the fastest way we possibly can. And then the second part of it is we wanna make sure that we have the capability to get that individual to an emergency room if necessary. You're welcome.
Question. Will Fire Station 7, although temporary, will you get an additional engine for that station or pulling from the other?
That's correct. We'll get an additional engine. We already have the ambulances. We started those last year. That additional engine company, as soon as that station opens, that additional engine company will come into play. Yeah.
Are you currently using drones, or if not, does the department have any interest in conducting drone operations?
So our police department has drones, and like a lot of things that we have in public safety, we share. Our boats we share, or boat, not the mobile command post we share. With them having a drone program, it doesn't make sense for us to start one of our own. If we have needs for the drone, which we've seen in the fire setting and we've even seen in the lifeguard setting, we call our friends in the police department and they'll bring their drone out and provide that resource for us. Now, that being said, there may be a time in the future where we need to train our own people on drones, and even still, I see it being a joint program between police and fire.
Understood, thank you.
We actually like our police department. Most fire departments don't like their police departments, but, we actually like our police department. Yes, ma'am.
Question, so you talked about the temporary station that's going to be in the ocean, the corridor.
The corridor.
There is a growing population, is there a long-term plan for a permanent additional fire station in that area?
Yeah, we know where the station needs to be. The problem, is who owns the land. So there's a lot of discussions. We'll be leasing the land for the temporary fire station. And as it's where the power plant came down, that's where it will be. And as we look at, what's gonna happen with that land where the power plant was, as well as the SDG and E lot right next door, and there's Cannon Park right there. The city's been working on a land swap where SDG&E may move. You probably saw in the paper recently. SDG&E may move over near the shops mall. And so all of that land swap and what we do, what we're trying to make sure happens is that the permanent fire station is built somewhere on that, between the railroad tracks, the ocean, Cannon Road, and the lagoon.
Okay.
That's where it needs to go.
But no time frame yet?
We gave ourselves a time frame of 2028. I do not think we will meet that 2028. I think there's a lot of things that need to take place with permitting that will extend beyond that. But fingers crossed, miracles can happen. I've seen it, and I hope it happens for this.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
How do you, make the selection who gets stuff cooking for everybody?
Usually a card game.
Is that how you do
It is.
How do they get stuck in the dishes too?
That's a card game as well. Real high-tech stuff. Yes, sir.
When is the new fire station 2 scheduled to open?
I think it's scheduled November, but I believe we'll see it, as early as September. It's ahead of schedule, which is a good play on words. So it's not ahead of the original schedule, but it's ahead of the last published schedule. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, is there how do you determine when there's fires outside of our area and send strike teams, and how we keep enough here? How's all that decided?
So it used to be, based off of a feeling. You know, we would our fire department, like all fire departments in the state of California, participate in a California Master Mutual Aid, which means all of us understand that there's not a single department that has enough resources to handle a large scale event like a wildfire with our own people. We need to ask for help from others, and sometimes from other states. If you remember Poinsettia Fire, we had Arizona and Nevada. There's people from several states. So we try to honor that agreement, but we also, by a feeling in the past of, well, what can we handle? What can we send out, and how many people can we call on emergency callback to have them come and staff the station? Because we don't ever want to leave a station browned out or blacked out. We want to make sure it stays in service. But what we've done recently, again, technology is a beautiful thing, can also be a hindrance, but we've used Excel spreadsheets where we put everyone in by title, by rank, by shift, and that spreadsheet will auto-populate when somebody is out either on a long-term injury or deployed on a large-scale event somewhere out. But we put their name in and we check the boxes of which rank they're in, what shift they're on, what station, and then that auto-populates to what we call drawdown. And when we look at that drawdown, we have a determination of we can continue to operate with 100% coverage in the city of Carlsbad if we have a drawdown on, so we're 3 shifts, A, B, and C shift. If we have a drawdown of X on any one of those shifts, or if we have a drawdown of X on any one of these ranks, and now we're able to get a really clear picture of that. So that allows two things. One, and most importantly, we're making sure that we have the adequate number of people available to take care of Carlsbad, which we never fell short of that in the past. But now the second part is we can actually send a little bit more than we used to, because we know exactly what the drawdown is. So we're being a better partner to our neighbors and others in the state of California.
Chief,
Yes, sir.
do we have any, if needed, helicopter support?
Ooh. A ton. San Diego is extremely fortunate as a county to have SDG&E. I'm not gonna get into whatever the rates are and all of that stuff, but when you look at the public utilities commissions up and down California, you've seen some, you've seen them in the news quite a bit, and some pretty big fines, and PG&E, Public Gas and Electric, some of the things that have happened up in Northern California, and some of the lawsuits about the wildfires and their part in that. Now, unfortunately, we lived through 2003 and 2007, but we learned as a county, and SDG&E learned as a public utilities company back then, and the things that they're doing today with their own fire department and the air support that they provide, some of the preventative measures that they do is fantastic. They are leading the state on public utilities commissions. So they're providing 4 separate aircraft right now, and they have another one coming online, which has night flying capabilities, which is fantastic. In addition to that, the county of San Diego has 2 helicopters, with the 3rd coming into play, and the city of San Diego also has 2 with the 3rd coming into play. On top of all that, if necessary, we can pull from Camp Pendleton as well. We don't do it all the time, but we have done it on occasion if there's a significant need for it. And we really, knock on wood, we've really seen a lot of success in recent years. A lot of it is because of that air support.
Did we have support in 14 helicopters?
We did. That's a good story. There was actually a former employee of the city of Carlsbad who had gone to work down in San Diego, just decided to go for a flight because he heard that there was a fire here, and they were able to drop some water pretty quickly. There is another resource out of Orange County that provides night vision or infrared vision, which we used on the fire, I think it was a year ago now, down by the lagoon, the park fire. That technology is in the process of being adopted by the state of California, Office of Emergency Services and CAL FIRE, and that technology is amazing. You can see they use that like hotspot technology to where you can actually see the sparks flying through the air. There's some good video out there on the park fire in Carlsbad. You can see the sparks flying in the air, where they land, and you can go and put out those hotspots before they turn into a larger fire that starts to burn down communities. So there's, again, technology has been great for us. It's been a hindrance in other areas, but it's been great for us on the fire side. Anything else?
Well, thank you, Chief. And there'll always be an opportunity for more questions. I don't know what your schedule is, but maybe you have a few minutes. But with this, I'd like to introduce Vicki Williams.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me and giving me this opportunity. As I was thinking about what to talk about today, I thought, I thought what I would do is kind of highlight, I thought, well, what are like the major things that are going through my mind and the command staff mind of the police department on what we're working on? What is it that we're putting our effort towards, in addition to going out and, answering all the 911 calls, responding to the calls for service, investigating the crimes, doing what cops do. But what is it other than that we're spending our significant amount of effort on? And there was 4 things that really popped up in my mind. One was dealing with a recruitment issue for law enforcement. I want to touch on that. 2 is dealing with de-escalation and crisis management and how that's changing our business. 3, the direction for City Council just this week, but something that we have been working on for about the last 2 years, is creating a community police engagement commission as another way for us to engage with the community. and then 4 active shooter response and preparation. So those are the kind of the things I thought, those are the things that we're talking about on an hourly basis in police management, both at our police department and regionally and statewide, some even nationally. So go into the recruitment and retention issue. Carlsbad Police Department, we're fortunate to be authorized 132 sworn police officer positions. We're also supplemented by over 60 non-sworn personnel, dispatchers, CSOs, and other types of support employees that help us do our job every day. But 132 of our employees are sworn, and that's from the chief position down. And when I say sworn, that means a police officer. It could be a chief police officer, it could be a patrol officer, but 132 people that are sworn. On an average, we are able to, with vacancies included, with people that are in training or in the academy, or when we're dealing with injuries, we're on average about 100 sworn officers able to deploy by themselves. A fully healthy, fully trained police officer, and that's from the chief position down. So we're able to have about 100 to 103 out of 132. And we're really fortunate because our vacancies, though we are maintaining vacancies, somewhere between, I'd say about 5 to 12 vacancies. They fluctuate, it seems like daily, between retirements and people leaving the business and then us being able to onboard new employees. But we're averaging probably 5 to 12 vacancies out of that 132, and then the rest are injuries, people in the academy, people in training. But you can see from an authorized authority of 132 down to about 100 to 103, somewhere in there is what we're actually able to put out into the field. That's a significant challenge in itself. But some of the trends that are affecting law enforcement business, there's really, I think, like 3 major things that are driving the ability to get people into police work. First is how complicated the job has become. What the type of employee that we're looking for is somebody that has the technical skill, the ability to utilize computer systems, the ability to utilize technology very comfortably, while being willing and able to physically do the job that is required, take the risk that's required, and then also somebody that has a background in a life history that makes them hireable, because that is a huge challenge. Also, I would say one of our major reasons for not being able to hire people is when we do backgrounds, the backgrounds just aren't in the way that we would be willing to onboard them as an employee of our department. So when you bring a person into our hiring process that has those skills, that has the background, that has the technological skill, has the physical ability, has the willingness to take risk, that employee has a lot of options, because that is a highly marketable employee. They can go probably, many of your businesses would be say, hey, I'll take a person that's in that situation. And so when you get a person that's hireable, they're very, very marketable. And law enforcement is very competitive, because every agency, and I would say every is a strong word, but it's just about accurate. Every agency is struggling to onboard people into police work. And so there's the technical piece, the skill base that I just talked about, and then you add on the overlay of the last couple of years and the level of scrutiny on law enforcement. And so you take an employee that has all of that that's hireable, and then you add over that, are they willing and interested in subjecting themselves to the level of scrutiny that's been seen nationally on law enforcement for the next 35, 37 years of their career? That's a decision that employees that we bring on have to make, and then also our existing employees are making on a pretty regular basis. One of the trends we're seeing is that people, and this was really foreign. Typically, once we got an employee on board, got them fully trained, they were out being successful police officers, for them to give up their career was really rare. Not so much anymore. We're seeing employees leave to purchase franchises of restaurants and run that because they want a different type of business and a different level of stress and different type of stress. Or getting into real estate, or getting into construction, or leaving the state and going somewhere else. one of the things that officers seek for a place to work is they want to serve a community that appreciates them. And that is one of the things that we market about Carlsbad when we talk about coming and working here, is how much appreciation, respect, grace that our community gives us as we try to go out and do our business. When we have situations that don't go right, and that happens in every community, our community is willing to, they hold us accountable. Our community holds us accountable, and they ask the appropriate questions, but they're willing to listen to what we say and our explanation on things, which is something that doesn't happen in every community. And that is something that is a real gift that the community gives us. I think partially it's been earned through our performance over the years, and it's something that we talk about on a regular basis that has to be a focus for us, is to maintain the community's trust so that they're willing to give us that grace and listen to us and give us the opportunity to do our jobs. So that's one piece on the recruiting and retention thing that I wanted to touch on. So we're really trying to get kind of creative on how we bring people into law enforcement. You'll notice a distinct change in the recruitment of police officers and what is being marketed. 5 or 10 years ago, it was usually a video of a SWAT team, maybe of a foot chase, maybe the canine jumping over the fence, like cops like borrowing the fire department's equipment and rappelling down the wall, which we don't actually do, but it looked cool on video. And so there's all those kind of videos, and that's what you would have saw 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now what you see is a cop walking along a sidewalk talking to somebody, or you see somebody or a cop having a cup of coffee and talking to somebody, or maybe a kid running up and hugging them. It's that type of environment that we try to market, because you do have to have the willingness to do the less than 1% of the job that is very dynamic and what you would maybe consider a police officer's job, but the 99+% is about talking to people. It's about taking care of people. It's about helping them out. It's about making sure that they're comfortable, that they feel welcome. That's what cops should be doing. And so that's what we really are trying to market. And maybe if you take a look at, if you have a moment online and you look at different police departments, look at their marketing and their recruitment, and I think you'll see a change over time of that type of content. The second piece I mentioned was the de-escalation and crisis management. So across the country, you've seen situations, and it's caused issues for law enforcement where something happens. It's usually caught on video now, and the community looks at it and they say, why did that happen? Like, that didn't have to happen. It doesn't seem like that should have happened. And then the police officer's response, or the police leadership response, is typically, it was within policy and it was within the law. And so there's this gap between what policy and law is and what the community was willing to accept from law enforcement. And both sides were right. It likely was within the policy and law. And it was probably something that didn't have to happen, maybe. And so we really, since 2018, have taken a leadership role in our county and made this a very high priority for us, and it's dealing with crisis situations. And one of the key things about dealing with crisis situations, when I'm talking about crisis, I'm talking conflict. It can be the lowest level of conflict, the traffic stop, where somebody just doesn't want to be bothered or told that they did something that they either don't think they did, or they just don't want to be reminded that they did something wrong. That's a real low level of crisis, typically, but it's something we need to deal with, to the very high level of crisis, which is becoming much more common for us, which is situations where people either are homicidal or suicidal, and police are called to try to remedy the situation peacefully. And so, so one of the deals with crisis that we figured out and that we have really focused on is how quickly we can identify whether we're dealing with a criminal crisis or a mental issue crisis is significant, because our response has to be different. And that's something that seems so simple. When we start talking about it, I'm thinking, like, duh, like, right? But it wasn't something we focused on prior to probably 2017. We had tactics that we used to keep us safe and the community safe. And really the tactics were interchangeable depending upon whether it was a mental crisis we were dealing with or a criminal crisis. And this is why it's so important based on our research and training, is criminal crisis situations are typically logical. For example, you may have somebody rob a bank. Now, I'm not saying you agree with the logic, but there is a logic to it that you can follow. Somebody robs a bank, they take off, the cops get the call, they see a car matching the description, they try to stop the person to see if they're the robber, they take off in a pursuit, maybe they shoot at you, maybe they don't, maybe they run through a field, maybe they don't, whatever it is, the logic that's being driven here is they want something and they're taking it, and they want to get away. They want to avoid capture. That's logic. So we can respond logically also. If we think we have the odds, if we think we have the factors in our advantage, continue to pursue, continue to try to apprehend. If we don't, we can back off and choose a different time, a different place to engage this person to take them into custody. And typically when we do that, if we back off, that person stops doing what they're doing because now they're not in fear of being apprehended, and then we come at them a different way, a different place where the odds are in our favor, where the odds are in the community's favor for a successful resolution. That's logical, and it's something that's fairly predictable. And so if we're dealing with a criminal issue, you can make decisions and they make sense in some way, I guess you would say. On the mental crisis side of the house, it's not that way. Because you could have a situation where a person's in a mental crisis and we get called and we're trying to maybe take this person to the mental hospital or protect their family from being harmed, or their neighbors from being harmed from this person. And if we leave, that very well is not going to stop the issue, because whatever's causing this isn't rational. It's an irrational thing that's happening. And so what we do to influence it along the logical lines doesn't help sometimes. And so what we've found is that if we can identify it as a mental crisis, the things that help us are time and distance. So you isolate the situation, you protect everyone else around it, and then you gain distance and time so that the decisions by everyone can be slowed down. And when you slow down the decision-making process, you end up with a better decision. And so what you end up with is less use of force typically, because the actions of the officers don't necessarily prompt something as dangerous and perceived it to be as dangerous from the person in crisis. And you allow time. It also, when you're dealing with a mental crisis, you're bringing a lot more resources to bear. You're bringing all the psychiatric assistance that we're able to provide per. We have the crisis response teams that are out for situations that aren't quite as elevated, to even pull law enforcement out of it, but put a different responding source in there to deal with the situation. But what you're finding is, and what we're finding is that by doing this, we're much more likely to be able to peacefully resolve the situation than we had in the past. That doesn't mean everything happens, because the person we're dealing with has a significant say in how things are going to go. And we do have a duty to protect ourselves and also the community around this person. But what we're finding is that by this is just simplifying our response, but by quickly figuring out what path we're on, whether it's a criminal, and they sometimes they're not as clear. So sometimes we'll get a call of a person with a baseball bat bashing out windows of parked cars in a parking lot. Is this a criminal issue? Technically, yes. You're dealing with vandalism, multiple vandalisms, felony vandalism probably. But really, this is a mental crisis we're dealing with, and we should be handling it as a mental crisis and not a criminal issue. And so sometimes these will bleed over, even a potential robbery call. We may get a robbery call with a person with a knife in a restaurant. But actually, as we start asking questions and paying attention to what's going on, we're not dealing with a robbery, we're dealing with somebody in a mental crisis situation, and our response needs to mirror those best practices and not the response to a robbery situation. So that's something that we've taken the lead on in the county. We created a countywide task force to deal with that, we came up with the countywide philosophy that we incorporated that philosophy using the assistance of stakeholders in our community that typically are the most scrutinous of law enforcement. We worked with them over several months and came up with a policy that they endorsed that we feel is really solid to put our cops in the best position to set the expectations of de-escalation as part of how we grade or evaluate our employees, how we evaluate our response to situations. It's incorporated in all of our promotional processes. So if you want to get promoted, you have to be good at this because it's going to be something that's going to be directly related to your promotability. So that's kind of how that's been part of our department for a while. The third piece was the new police community engagement commission. So that was the direction of council on Tuesday. That's been the result of work over the last 2 years evaluating police department statistics regarding use of force, the community, going out and talking to the community 10 plus times to get from them what their feeling and level of trust is in our department. And so we're excited about this, and I really think it's a good opportunity because the more opportunity we have to meet with the community, to explain what we do, to answer questions, to get to know us, the better we're gonna be. Because I'm very, very confident if you met the people, if you actually met the people that are out working to protect your community, you'd be impressed by who they are and you would want them to be your cops. But you have to get to know them. So this is just gonna be another opportunity for that. So more to come on that. And then the last piece is the active shooter response. So this has been something our department has taken very seriously. And one of the triggering events for us, I mean, obviously we watch things nationally and we've seen how these things have developed. But in 2010, when we had the Kelly school shooting, it really brought to us that we could have a person in our community that has this mindset that intends to do this type of action. It has happened here in our city, and it could happen again. And so since then, we've taken this very seriously. And there's a couple of different ways we've really gone after this. One is providing our cops the training. And providing for the mindset. We're blessed to have the training facility that we share with the fire department, and that there gives us the ability to do active shooter training in a business type, multi-story, like apartment complex or office building, or in a residence, or along storefronts, or an open area type areas on the grinder. So there's a ton of opportunity there for us to actually put our cops through what this looks like. We typically, when we do active shooter training, part of it is in the classroom talking about mindset and tactics, and then actually going out and doing it. And when you're doing it, we typically use simunitions, which are it's like a paintball, but it's a little bit different. And they hurt when you get hit. It causes that feeling of anxiousness when you know you're likely to be engaged with a person. One of the things that's pretty clear is police officers' response to active shooters. Very high percentage an officer's gonna get shot. That's just part of the process. And the cops have to buy into that to be allowed to go out into the field as a police officer. You have to accept that you're gonna take that risk. And that was something that changed for us after Columbine. So we go through the training. Also part of it's been equipment. We've invested a significant amount in equipment. We're one of the few departments that issues patrol rifles to all of our police officers. And I've gotten questions, hey, I see a police motorcycle driving around, he's got a rifle on the back, like really in Carlsbad? Well, the reason why we do that is because when a call comes out of an active shooter or a concern for an active shooter, the closest cops go, and the first cop there, whether it's me or the first guy on his first day out in the field, is expected to engage. And so what you've seen in Texas recently, I don't know the facts of it, but it's exceptionally unfortunate that that was the law enforcement response, or at least that's the perception of what the law enforcement response is, because I don't know what the facts are on that. But I would not be, that would not be an acceptable, if what we're hearing is accurate, it would not be an acceptable response, because in addition to stopping the shooting or the killing, we also have a duty to go in and stop the dying. So just because the shooting is stopped, we expect our officers to take the risk that it takes to go in there and evacuate people to get them to the help that is gonna be right behind us the whole way. So, that's kind of the mindset. So some of the things in addition to signing, so when I hear that question about the police motorcycle, if you or a loved one is in a situation and you're calling for help because you believe you have an active killing situation going on, if the motor officer happens to be around the corner on a traffic stop and they hear that and they throw the driver's license back to the person, they get on their bike and they're there within 30 seconds, that motor officer is gonna be able to put on a Kevlar helmet. They're gonna be able to put on, we issue all of our police officers, in addition to the soft body armor we wear, which is highly protective with handgun type rounds, but rifle rounds, which when we're seeing AR-15s and stuff like that, this will not stop, it'll go right through it. However, I have, and we all are issued porcelain plates in vest carriers that we can put over this, and the combination protects our vital organs from the AR-15 rounds. So we issue that. So we want our cops to know that, hey, you're gonna have the armor to go in, you're gonna have the weaponry to go in, and we expect you to go deal with the situation. And that's how we train our cops. So that is the mindset that every Carlsbad police officer that you have in the back of their car or on their motorcycle, they have that equipment, and that's to provide you the quickest reassurance that we got your back if something happens in your area. On that, one of the things that we do is also planning. So there are some targets and situations where you can see the potential for an issue to arise. And so when we see those, we actively engage, we prepare event action plans for anything, like for example, a school graduation, we just had them. We spend a ton of time and resources planning tactically for those types of situations, because we wanna make sure everyone's there, comfortable, safe, and that we're on hand, ready to deal with the situation if it happens. And so the planning process is one that's really important. One of the things that we just got debriefed by the FBI, they just printed out their report on active shooters for 2021, and there's two things that they highly suggest based on the research. And this would be appropriate for business owners and people that are in the community. There's two pieces. One, the concept of see something, say something, and it sounds cliche. This is the research though that supports it. The vast majority of active shooter situations had what's called plan leakage. They had a plan going in. It takes time to develop the tools and the research typically that it goes into these type of situations, and the plan is leaked typically. Especially the younger the age of the assailant, the more leakage you're gonna get. So like when we're seeing 18-year-old shooters, those plans are being leaked. People have heard things about what the intentions were, and those have to be reported. When we get a school threat and we get various types of school threats, it's not that uncommon at all, and that's what our SROs spend a lot of our school resource officers spend a lot of time on. We conduct a thorough investigation, we contact the kid, we go out and do home site visits, we search the residences with either typically a search warrant or consent, we recover the weapons, we put the parents on notice, and we also complete a suspicious activity report to the FBI's LACC, which provides a database for these type of things, so that if just by chance the person that made a threat here at Carlsbad also works in Escondido and made a threat at work and they dealt with it, now we're gonna know that, okay, wait a second, the same person has just made a threat in Escondido, has made a threat in Carlsbad, here's all the information with all of them, and then we're all put on notice of these type of situations. It's to try to make sure that we all have the best amount of intel, the best intel we have on these types of threats. So the leakage is real. So when you or your family or your loved ones hear something that is suspicious and you go, man, that just doesn't feel right, trust your gut and call us. You're not gonna get anyone in trouble. Typically when we're dealing with these situations, they're mental issues, and we try to get the person connected to mental health care. But we also can do things like get a gun violence restraining order, which when we serve, we also serve in conjunction with a search warrant, so we're able to go take all the guns and serve them with a restraining order that prevents them the ability to have weaponry or purchase weaponry or ammunition, stuff like that. So there are things we can do, and many plans have been disrupted because of these kind of tips. So the leakage and the see something, say something, And then also training and mindset. You never know where these things are happening. A lot of focus is put towards the schools, but a significant number of these happen in business environments, whether it's an employer type situation or a customer type situation. And so if I were in a business environment, I would have some sort of plan about if something were to happen, like just think it through. You don't have to, like, I'm not asking you to like armor yourself. I'm just just have a plan. Because typically what happens in these situations is it takes a little bit of time for you to actually appreciate what is happening, because you're so blown away, like this has to be a joke, right? It very well may not be. And so the more you think about it, the more you've worked through the pathways of how to handle or respond to one of these situations, the better you're gonna perform if you happen to be in one of these situations. And if not, perfect. But if you do, being ahead of the curve by just 30 seconds may make a significant difference for you, whether it's locking the doors or making an escape or having things set up so that you can conveniently get somewhere that's more safe, something like that effect. So that's something those are the things that are going on in my brain. Yes, sir.
Chief, first of all, thanks for arming your officers. Secondly, when are you gonna bring back coffee with a cup?
We actually, awesome. We actually talked about that yesterday. We're picking, there's 2 different coffee shops we're talking to right now. So my guess is you'll see it put out within a week or 2, a month. Yeah. Yes, sir. And then you may.
I have 2 questions. One is, at Vivaldi, the public communications response at the state level was pathetic. I mean, they're saying, well, the police didn't go in because they didn't want to get shot, and the information was bad. And so, can you address how you handle that?
Yeah.
And the second is, how do we as individuals or as part of the community, I'm in a retirement community, how do we plan ahead? How do we tell people what to do? Their videos, are you willing to come and talk to us? Do we just ignore it because it's a very hard subject?
Yeah,
So,
it is.
But
Yes,
the
sir.
public communications, and then what do individuals do?
Sure, so the public communications, so both the communications, whether it's an incident related, like we're hearing things from Texas, and again, I'm just going from what I've heard in the news, I don't know any information that you probably don't know. But what we're hearing is that there was potential for commanders on scene not to be getting updates on what's actually happening. That's troubling. That's not good. We are in a situation in our county between the investment that we have in our radio systems and the interoperability of our radio systems in our county. We are on a system where if we had an incident, and when we had the Kelly School incident, immediately our dispatchers can patch to a channel that everyone in our county can jump on, so that when National City police officers in Chula Vista and Escondido and Cal State San Marcos and Palomar College police are all coming to help us out, everyone's gonna be on the same channel. Everyone's gonna be listening to one incident commander that's telling them what to do. And so the communications on scene is, we have the foundation that we've had for about 20 years to have that level of interoperability and making sure that everyone's in the know. But to your question also, after the incident happens, who's gonna take the lead as being the PIO? Who's gonna be the one that communicates with the community about what's going on? Typically, if it's an event, it's gonna be, in our city, it's gonna be us. And us being the Carlsbad Police Department. There will be some interoperations with the FBI typically, because there is gonna be some sort of FBI nexus typically to one of these type of potentially terrorist type situations, whether it's domestic or international. So there's gonna be an overlay of that, but typically it's gonna be the fault of the local law enforcement. I think what you're seeing in Texas though, is the local law enforcement, it's really a small department, and I think they're just overwhelmed. And so I think almost on a day-to-day basis, out in that area, you're probably seeing a lot of state handling of complicated issues, where here, we're a full-service police department, we have the infrastructure in place to be able to deal with that. And so I think what you would see is a more accurate, my hope would be a more accurate, timely rollout of communications. To your question on what do we do? So since about 2016, we provided run, hide, fight training. I don't know if you've gone to it, but we've provided that to businesses that asked for it. We also did community trainings where you could just sign up and come to the police department. We stopped that with COVID. We are intending to start those back up. There's a lot of interest in it, and now that we can get people together, for us, it's a great opportunity for you to meet us and for us to talk about something important, and also relay information that's going to maybe put you in a better position, or your family in a better position if these events happen. So, So my suggestion would be, if you have a desire, or your business or you have a desire, you would like an officer to come talk to you about some of the basics, because it's really not that complicated. You just have to think about it and kind of apply the basics to your environment.
Right, when you hear somebody like you talk about it, you're calm.
Yeah.
When you hear people talking about rumors, you're not.
Right, yeah. So if you can reach out, the police department has a police email. You can just shoot a thing saying, hey, I'm so-and-so business or so-and-so community, and we would like to have an officer come talk to us about what to do in the event of an active shooter. And we'll reach out to you, and we'll be happy to get somebody dialed into, because we have they've got certified trainers that teach that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me,
Sure. So 2 parts. Yours and your officer's decisions are made often in a moment, right? Is there ongoing training in terms of psychological, to assess the individual, to be able to make that appropriate decision? Is there training consistently being offered to the officers? And secondly, are resources available to the officers that they can use it when they've come out of a stressful situation to kind of de-escalate, and that part of the self-care,
yes,
for them to be able to better respond and also better function in not only in the community but even in their home situation?
Great questions. So the first piece of it regarding the going to the officer resilience piece. Sarah from Coherence joined with us a little over 10 years ago, and we went from a department that really didn't have any sort of officer wellness component. It was just kind of, you just kind of went and did your thing, and the only time you would get assessed is if you had the unfortunate situation to be in a shooting or something like that, and you would only get assessed to the extent that, are you healthy enough to go back to work? That's it. There was no wellness component at all. That 10 years ago, we switched that, and we went to a focus on, we want to build an environment within our department where our people feel good about going and doing police work for 30 plus years. And law enforcement career has lots of ups and downs with the types of situations and events that you deal with. So you have to build resilience, and that's a word I even appreciate until I met Sarah, and then Sarah's kind of taught me what resilience looks like. And so that is a major element within our department. From the day that when an officer gets hired, I swear them in to being a police officer. On that same day, we bring the entire family, the parents, the kids, the spouses, brothers and sisters, if they would like to come, of the officers, and talk to them about resiliency and about the need to avail yourself of help to communicate things that are very, very stressful that officers deal with, and that sort of thing. So we have a significant structure within our police department. And one of the main things that has taken time, but I really feel like we're in a good spot on, is stigma. A lot of things that prevented cops in the past from getting help or being even saying, hey, I want to have a conversation with somebody about something, is, okay, are they going to think I'm crazy, and are they going to take away my job? Are they going to put me out of service, you know, whatever it is? And then also, what are my partners going to say? Are my partners going to think I'm weak or I'm broken or whatever it is? And so 10 years ago, when we started rolling out this concept, we would have significant incidents, and they happen pretty regularly. And we would say, okay, we want to have a debrief where everyone can come and talk. Not a tactical debrief, not like how we did our job, but how did you experience it? What did you see? What did you smell? How does it make you feel? Like, how are we going to move forward from here as stronger people? And have that kind of conversation as a group from everyone, whether it's the dispatcher or the cop or the CSO that had to collect the evidence or whatever it is. And so we threw those out there, and we're like, you know, should we make these mandatory? Like, cause I don't think people are gonna show up. Like, who's gonna show up? Everyone's gonna be afraid to be the one to show up, you know? And a little bit it was like that when we first started, you know, you'd get there and it'd be like, okay, we had 15 people involved in this and we got 6 here. Good, but I would certainly like to have the other, you know, 9 or so. And, but what we've seen is over time, the culture, because it's just part of our conversation, is when we have a critical incident, when we have something really tragic happen, we go, okay, we need to call the detectives out, we need to call the PIO, we need to make sure that command staff knows what's going on, and we gotta call peer support, because peer support's gotta roll out on this too. It's just part of what we do. And so, and then everyone knows, hey, you know, next Tuesday, we're gonna come in an hour early for our shift, and we're gonna have a debrief led by a counselor. And then as a result of that, we have free counseling that's confidential for all of our people and their families. So if you leave there going, you know what, I'd like to get personally something off my chest or something, or this is triggering something that happened to me 10 years ago, then you can reach out to the counselors. And another thing that's happened is the counselors that we use they're so familiar with law enforcement that the stuff we can throw out, it doesn't blow them away. They're like, okay, yeah, that happens, you know, we'll fix this type of thing. Instead of typically somebody that doesn't work with law enforcement a lot, you roll something out, the facts out, and it's just like, whoa, it doesn't even blow them away sometimes. So, and they're just part of our family now. They're just seen as part of our team and one of our helpers. So, yeah, it's something we've invested a lot of time and effort in as far as the wellness. And then the first piece of your question was
about when you're making a split second decision.
Yeah, and so the key on that is when you compress decisions in time that are high stress and high risk, your risk of error is higher relatively than you would want. So what we've tried to do is set up through our de-escalation and crisis management is tactics and techniques to provide time and distance, which slows down the environment, which allows us not to have to make the decisions in such compressed time. Really, there are a few times in going to our active shooter, like if we're dealing with, if the radio call comes out, hey, gunshots coming from business, people potentially hit. That's one of the situations where we do not have time to sit around and think. We gotta get into action and our training has to take over. However, if we're dealing with a situation with a person knocking out windows in a parking lot, we have time to think, okay? No one's being hurt right now. We'll replace the windows. Let's make sure no one's in the parking lot. Let's give this person a lot of time. Let's set up some people that are trained to talk to this person. Let's not just have firearms, but let's have less lethal. Let's set up a really good perimeter so that the person's contained and not gonna hurt anybody. And now let's just slow this down. You know what I mean? And so by doing that, we're limiting the number of times that we're having to make those really bang decisions. Another example that's been a major shift in law enforcement is the service of search warrants. If you ever watch cops like in the 80s and 90s, you get a search warrant and then you'd get a van and you'd run up and you jump out in the driveway and you run to the front door and you say like, hurry up please, and you hit the ramp and then you'd all run through the thing and like the dogs would then come at you and the kids would be laying around and then the parents would and then like maybe somebody's running to the bathroom to try to get rid of evidence. And that it's just like a circus, right? And you look, I'm thinking back and I was a part of serving easily over 100 of those type of warrants. And I think back and I go, why? Why did we do that? Because even back then, if we dealt with somebody that were like, okay, information is that the person keeps a shot, they have a camera, and they keep a loaded shotgun next to the front door. On that one, we probably wouldn't do that. What we would do is wait for that person to leave when we'd stop them, and then we would go back and serve the warrant at the house when the person wasn't home because we already took them into custody on a traffic stop at the market or whatever. Well, okay, if we did that when we knew it was dangerous, why didn't we do that? Like, right? It's just such common sense. And it's embarrassing to think that we didn't do it, but it just takes things to happen for us to improve the way we do police work. And now, I can't even, other than a hostage rescue, I can't think of a situation for a dynamic search warrant. We call them dynamic search warrant entries. You're gonna do a contain, you're gonna do, if it's a situation where you're worried about evidence, you're gonna set up plain playing cars out in front, you're gonna follow the person away, pick the place and location and the way you wanna take that person into custody where it's the safest way to do it, and then you're gonna deal with the house on its own. You're just not gonna go ram the door like you used to see on cops. But that used to be the business. So when you go to your question of like, how do you train people not to make, or to make decisions, under high risk? We're trying to limit the number of times, and we're pretty successful in, based on our tactics, limiting that. And then on the very few times where we do have to make the bang decisions, we have to rely on our training. We have to know that, hey, when that kind of call goes out, you know to put this on first, this on, put your weapon on, make sure you switch it there, and you're going in this way, and this is the safest way to walk, and do your job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
The so-called hardening of schools.
Yes.
How are we in Carlsbad with the single entrance into our schools?
The superintendent and the school district has made a significant investment post the Kelly school shooting in 2010, in fencing and those type of things, and also enforcing their policies on check-ins and that sort of thing. So that is something that the school district is taking very seriously. It's a policy decision, and I think it's a national policy decision on what's the appropriate level of hardening for schools, knowing that they are potential targets for.
Most of our schools have many buildings.
What'd you say?
Most of our schools have a lot of different buildings.
That's correct.
But you fence them so they can only do one entrance.
Yes, unless you scale the fence or are able to get over it, yeah. But there has been significant work done by the Carlsbad Unified School District to harden the schools. But I think nationally, there's just a discussion on where do we all feel comfortable? What kind of environment do we feel comfortable having for our schools? And does that include metal detectors and an armed person there at all times, or are we comfortable with what we have? And it's more of, that's really not a law enforcement thing, that's more of a policy decision on what kind of community do we wanna have. Well, okay, I got told, one more question. Oh, two, how about, can I have two? All right, two. Yes, ma'am.
So we have lived here almost 17 years, and we've had incredible interaction with the police department. So many examples of positive encounters that it would take up most of my question to go through them. Most recently, Sergeant Bubness helped our community on Saturday, and he did that in a 20-hour response. Most of that was overnight sleeping, so it was amazing that he was there, and quite a few people came to hear him. One of the concerns that our community had is that it seems there's a couple of gangs operating right now from LA County, Riverside County, Orange County, and San Diego County that have a very similar description for break-ins in homes. And somebody fronts the home, kind of looks at it, determines if someone's home or not. Once it seems that no one is currently there, they go around the side yard, break into the sliding glass door in a quiet way. The door shatters, but neighbors don't hear it. They enter quickly, go straight to the master bedroom, look for valuables, pull their car, which is usually a white minivan, which looks very reasonable, into the garage and backing it in, and then load whatever the items are they're taking out, usually a safe that they found in the master bedroom, and quickly leave. That can be done in a matter of a few minutes. This happened to 2 homes in our neighborhood in the past couple months, and the first one, the police in Carlsbad did a wonderful job of finding the gang, arrested them, put them in prison. They were out in 24 hours, and we know that's not your issue. The second home just happened on Friday, and it was the exact same MO. And so our concern as a community and neighborhood, and I think it also affects all of Carlsbad, is what do you suggest is the best way that we can protect ourselves?
Yep.
And I know that there's task force operating between the 4 different counties, but what can we do in your
So what you're describing is a crime series that is taking place in Southern California, without a doubt. And it's something that we have investigators that are dedicated to work on. The thing you can do the most to help us out, we are absolutely the one of a kind as far as the city's investment in license plate readers. And they are huge for our, very often it's Carlsbad's the one that solves regional issues because of this humongous asset we have. So if you invest in even the cheapest surveillance camera system, if you're able to provide us a vehicle description that's involved in a crime, our cops typically are gonna be able to solve it, most of the time. And so, and especially if you're starting to deal with series, there's the searching capability in our license plate reader system to work for series. And so we've had situations where we've had, you know, several months long series and a crime happens here and then a week later something happens here and here and here. And we're able to do an analysis to see what plates are consistent amongst, and it's very few. And then we're able to focus in and direct our detectives on where to look, and then they start building their cases. So I would say the best thing you can do is, one, secure your place, but when they're breaking the window, that's not so easy. Two, invest in video surveillance, because if you can invest, even the cheap stuff, all we need is a slight description and let our detectives go, and they'll usually get there.
And all these homes had ring cameras, and so we immediately put the pictures on the mailbox, the community mailbox of the woman who was knocking in the door, the van that was outside. We didn't capture the license plate.
That's okay.
So we're wondering if we should get a license plate reader as you enter the
No, you don't need a license plate reader. If you just get a camera, but even a description gives our cops, puts the cops on a pretty good way. But you don't need a license plate reader. All you need is, if you just got a camera that was positioned in a place to get a license plate, and then let the cops do their work from there. Well, last question, Dave's gonna pull me out of here. Yes?
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about the department's drone program and where you see the future of the program?
Yeah, so we've had a pretty significant drone program for about the last 5 or so years. We deploy them in several different areas. Our SWAT team has several capabilities, both to fly inside and outside. A lot of what we use those for is for either flighting, like where we know an event's gonna happen or an enforcement action's gonna take place, so that we can make sure that we utilize the information to put us in the best position possible. Also, just this week, actually, we were looking for 2 suspects involved in a fatal hit and run, driving a stolen vehicle. We put the drone up because they left on foot. We put the drone up to search and ended up finding them at a nearby gas station. So, searching for suspects. Also, our homeless outreach team utilizes the drones to go out at night and look for where encampments are based on the heat signatures, so that we're directed in, or also to put oversight in. So if they've marked something for takedown as far as breaking down an encampment, what they'll do is they'll put the drone up above to let them know, hey, you got somebody hiding over here, or it's for an officer safety aspect to it, which makes everyone safe, so the cop doesn't get surprised, or we can call out, hey, please come over here, or please put your dog on a leash, or whatever it is. So we've been using drones for a long time, and we use them, I would say, just about daily, and they're in the trunks of cars out in the field on a regular basis. All right, David's kicking me out of here. Thank you.